So, when did counseling stop being about problem solving? Well, not anymore. Introducing solution-focused counseling with the unlicensed counselor. And now, here's your host, Steve Moak.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of The Unlicensed Counselor. My name is Steve Moak. I am the Unlicensed Counselor, and as always, so grateful to be here on this scorcher of a Scottsdale, Arizona day. But hey, glad to be here as always. Hey, I want to start the show out by saying happy birthday to somebody behind the scenes that you don't always see here. Rob Big 6-0, bringing it down. Glad to have you. Thanks for all your help on the show. Couldn't do it without you. Robin, as always, appreciate you as well, too. But, hey, like I always say, we have a lot of fun here at the show. One of these days, we're going to bring you the before the show stuff, just because it's a little too much fun sometimes. But, as usual, got some fun stuff I want to talk about. I think it's fun. I think it's interesting, if nothing else. You know, like I always say, I wrap these shows and start thinking about next week's topic. And one that's been on my mind lately, I don't know if it's because of me or it's because of others in my life, but it's more than likely a combination of the both, is ego, right? And where does it come from? How do people develop or lack of develop or have a too big a ego? I know we see that a lot in the presidential world and politics and things like that. But I've just had this thought of sometimes the people in my life or the people I interact with, or maybe I'm reflecting on myself a little bit of how does ego develop? What to do with it? How do you keep it in check? And it just had some of these thoughts that I wanted to kind of throw out there to kind of get you thinking about maybe where your ego is, where you would like it to be, where it's not. Maybe it's too inflated, things like that. So, I think some of the topics that I like to bring to you are I just want you to start thinking about some new things, thinking about topics, do a little introspection on things that maybe haven't crossed your radar in a while. And I'm not saying it to kind of check you, but I also don't think, especially when it comes to an ego, that it's necessarily a bad thing to kind of make sure that you have that in line. Because honestly, if that ego gets a little too inflated sometimes, we all know those people, and they can be a little challenging to be around as well, and not a lot of fun, candidly. So, but before we do that, I want to say a big thank you to our friends over at BetterDrugTest.com. Again, this is our longtime sponsor. This is the at-home drug or alcohol screen. They ship it directly to your front door. It tests for the most substances. It is the most comprehensive at-home drug and alcohol screen available on the market. Go to BetterDrugTest.com. It's the one that I've used. It's the one that I recommend to all the people who ever talk to me about their son, daughter, husband, or wife may having a drug or alcohol issue. You need to be measuring and seeing if there is things in their system, and this tests for the most drugs and alcohol as well. Go to BetterDrugTest.com. Again, big thanks to those folks as well, too. Then I always like to plug the nonprofit work that I'm doing as well, too. Go to thestopstartshere.org. Getting ready to release. I just saw all the new posts that we're getting ready to release this morning. I'm very excited to be able to do that. Again, this is a youth drug abuse prevention organization, something I'm very passionate about. There's only one way that I know to ever prevent drug addiction, and that is by never starting. So we want your kids following this, and you parents, we want you giving us a follow too. Give us a follow at Hard Stop Official on all the usual places. Last but not least, shameless plug, give the Unlicensed Counselor a follow on all the usual social media stops as well too. Putting out a lot of clips, a lot of content. YouTube channel is growing. Also, I'm going to start working on that planning. I think I mentioned this before about going out and doing some speaking tours and speaking engagements as well, too. And we're getting close to finally wrapping this book up here as well, too, which should be fun. Fingers crossed we get that done in 2024 as well, too. So, okay, enough of that stuff. Let's dig into the ego. So I thought I'd start the show. We hear ego thrown around a lot. Some people have, kind of a modest ego. Some people have an inflated ego. Some kind of don't have any at all. But what is? Let's start by just the basic understanding of what is an ego. So the ego is a term that's used to describe an individual's sense of self-importance, self-esteem, and self-identity. Now, this is kind of a complex thing that really doesn't come from just one place. It's really a construct that encompasses one's beliefs about themselves, their capabilities, and their worth. So just so you have an idea of when we're talking about ego, I know we think of ego, and typically we think of it in the sense of that person has a huge ego or they're egotistical. We don't usually think of kind of meek or mild type people when it comes to ego. but it really can come from all these different places. Now, where does it develop from? Well, let's just start there, and then we're just going to work through why some people have bigger egos than others, how they get an imbalanced ego, and then also how to keep an ego in check as well, too. We'll kind of round out the show with that. But first and foremost, where does an ego even come from, right? Is it just something that you're born with? Is it something that you're wired with? Well, it comes from really kind of four main areas. So early childhood experiences, right? So things early on in your life that help shape kind of how you start to build that ego. So that's interactions with your parents, with your caregivers, your environment, right? And again, this can be positive or negative as well too, but positive reinforcement, love, and support contribute to kind of a healthy upbringing and sense of ego as well too, while negative experiences tend to lead to that inflated or diminished ego as well too. So something to really keep in mind of for all the parents that are out there. I know I just shot some social when we were talking about this episode with my daughter in the clip. You know, how we're doing in raising our kids is at this age, at 4, my daughter's 4 years old, is going to impact how she develops her ego. So I think it's something that you maybe have more, I don't want to say control over, but certainly influence of as these kids are young and impressionable and starting to form kind of who they are as well too. Now, the next thing that where the development of the ego comes from is really those social interactions. So that's your peers, your social status, the feedback from others, and the influence, kind of that is where your ego can develop from as well too. That also dovetails into successes, failures, acceptance, rejections. All of this contributes when you're out there interacting with people in the world as to how you start to build that ego up, or if somebody's taking a hatchet to you at all these different ways, how you're getting chopped down as well too. These are the things that start to shape you early on. So really think about those social interactions, especially early. And early doesn't just mean toddler years. I mean, I think up through the teens and even into our 20s is really where we can kind of get shaped and molded. I was reading an article the other day. I think it was, gosh, I should have wrote this down. I think it's like the brain continues to develop or not form to like 25 or something like that. Just means we have a lot longer than we think to where this thing that's sitting on the top of our head is really kind of cemented. So that thing is very kind of moldable up until that point. I'm not saying it can't be shaped after that, but just something to keep in mind. I always felt like, you kind of are who you are by 16 or something like that. No. Which also is why, teen drug and alcohol use is an important thing as well, too. The sooner you can prevent that, right, it gives you the chance to mature to that brain. But I digress. Let's get back to the ego conversation for now. Next up on kind of the development of the ego is the cultural influences as well. So societal values, societal norms, this is going to have a huge impact on how you develop. And it's going to depend on where you live as well, too. That's where these societal norms kind of come from, because there's other countries and cultures who are very, very different than the United States, shockingly. Maybe better, maybe worse. I'm not sure. But they're really going to shape how your ego is and how it is built. So the emphasis on individualism may promote a stronger sense of self-identity, which I think is kind of how we are in the United States, while in other cultures, that collectivist idea or mentality may encourage more of a group-oriented or that group sense of self than kind of that individualistic things. I think it is, I'm not going to say it's a uniquely American trait, but I think it's one that we've kind of built our culture on as well, too, is that you're allowed to be whatever it is. Comes with some drawbacks, right? Certainly comes with some drawbacks, but I do kind of think that the American value is that you can be who you want and let that ego kind of build because of that. I think that's overall a good thing, but I don't know, maybe sometimes we've let it go a little too far. But I digress. Again, let's bring it back to the last thing of where the development of an ego kind of comes from, and then we'll get into why some people may have a little inflated sense of ego as well, too. But that's really around your personal achievements and failures. So not just all the good things, but some of the bad things and how that helps form your ego as well, too. So personal accomplishments as well as setbacks affect your self-esteem and they affect your ego. So while these achievements can certainly help boost your ego, right? We all like it when that happens. Failures can do the same thing in the other way. It can diminish it And when it gets diminished, what can happen is then it could lead to some overcompensation as well, too. So if things kind of aren't going necessarily, that person may start to overcompensate, which can lead to a lot of times that the gross thing that we get around people with really high senses of ego as well, too. So, okay, now we kind of gave you a background on what the ego is, where and how it can be developed. Now, why do some people have kind of that stronger ego and others do not? How does that necessarily happen? First things first is genetics, right? So some aspects of personality, including ego, are influenced by genetic predispositions. Now, I will say in my family, I'll just speak to my family, we are at no shortage of this. And it's not that we are a bunch of egomaniacs and all, but we've got a good, cohesive family unit. And I think we have very strong identities. And I think we've mostly maintained a pretty good balance of what that is. And I think you can see it in my brother has kids and my kids and even extended family as well, too. You can just see where a lot of this kind of rather even type of ego is spread across the whole family. And I certainly think that genetics can play an influence on this. And I think it certainly plays itself out in our family tree as well, too. But I think the parental influence is the next thing, that the type of parenting and early childhood experiences significantly impact ego development. So supportive and balanced parenting tends to lead and foster more of a healthy style of ego, while neglect or excessive pampering can lead to an imbalanced ego. Okay, this is where I should just check myself before I go on a total rant, because I just think that the world in terms of parenting right now, I think we're seeing the outcome of this wildly permissive parenting right now. And that's why these kids, and I'm talking teens and into the 20s, are continuously kind of the topic of being made fun of, because their parents have just given them everything. They've pampered them to the point where it's just like embarrassing when they've got to go to work for a couple hours a day. I think this feeds into the entitlement and things like that. And so now these kids' sense of ego, when they just get handed everything all the time, and all of a sudden maybe they're out of the house and they're not getting what they want, and they've got to go show up for a job, God forbid, for a couple hours a day, and they break. And we've all seen the videos on social media where, these folks are just kind of wimpily crying and things like that. And I think that's where a lot of this comes. And that, I don't want to blame the kids, because if you've been handed everything and your ego is built in this way that you just expect the world to arrive at your doorstep, it's really a reflection on your parenting style as well, too. But challenging stuff out there in the world today. So the next thing on why some people have stronger egos and why some not are really those life experiences. So traumatic events, significant achievements, and personal relationships all contribute to shaping one's ego as well, too. Now, I don't know how do I want to say this, right? I think the traumatic events, traumatic is even a strong word, but challenging things when you're growing up, not having the world handed to you on a silver platter certainly can help build character. When you have to go to work, if you're going out to help your parents and things like that, you've got sports, you've got school, you've got grades, you've got after school things. All of those things that you kind of participate in the world help kind of build up that character, which can also help contribute to having a well-adjusted ego, in my opinion. Now, if you don't have a lot of those things and you're just kind of floating through time and space without any type of gravity, I think that you're going to struggle or may have a inflated sense of ego because, again, things have just been handed to you. So it's just something to keep in mind as you're examining, what is my ego? How did my ego come to be? What does it look like? Are you able to accurately assess what your ego looks like, and then maybe look back at all the life things that you've gone through, positive and negative, and kind of see how that may or may not have shaped you. And I think that would be a good exercise, because then maybe you can be having some conversations with your kids around how to keep this in check as well, too. And last but not least, on the ego thing in terms of why some stronger, why some not, self-reflection, awareness. I think healthy people who engage in self-reflection and personal growth activities are much more likely to have a balanced ego, right? I just think that is an underutilized thing in our world today, where we can accurately look at ourselves and go, okay, I'm going to take some time over the course of the last few years. I'll just use myself as an example. have you grown? Have you stayed stuck? What are areas that you have improved upon? What are areas that maybe still need some improvement? Or what areas do you just outright suck in? By doing this, I think it can help keep you a little more humble in the world and help not prevent that ego getting in check. Look, would it be great if all of a sudden this podcast blew up? Would it probably, in fact, impact my ego and boost some of my self-confidence? Yes. But I think it's important to be able to make sure that you're checking that along the way, too, so that your ego doesn't get too high. I mean, we all like successes, but when you let those go a little too far, I think that's where the real problem comes in. In fact, there's a quote that I was doing when I was doing some show prep here from a gentleman maybe you've heard of, Mahatma Gandhi. It said, "When the ego dies, the soul awakens." And I've had that kind of running through my head over the course of the last few days because I just think that we don't spend enough time thinking about our ego and in making sure that it stays in this kind of checked place. And I guess the opposite of ego would be humble. And that's something that I really try and work on in my own life because it would be easy to just kind of continue to, look at yourself in a very positive light and maybe sometimes get a little too full of yourself. So I encourage you to see if you can do an honest assessment of where you're at in your life with your ego and make sure that thing's in check and balance. Okay, so what are some things that can cause an imbalance of the ego as well, too? Number one thing, and I will speak to this, and sometimes I feel like I get on here and talk like I have all the answers. No, the reason I've got good insight into a lot of these things is because I've been on the other side of this quite a bit, right? So number one, and what causes it, inflated insecurity, right? Insecurity, number one. Underlying insecurities and low self-esteem can lead to an inflated ego is really a defense mechanism as well, too. So you kind of overcompensate for all the insecure things you have going on in your life, and you project that much more out into the world as a way of kind of making sure nobody else sees that, right? That you're able to hide these things when really you're kind of this frail, insecure person on the inside, right? And so that's the number one thing. If you see that overinflated, over kind of pushing, ego, there's a good chance that somebody could have some underlying deep insecurities going on there as well, too. Number two, imbalance of that or inflated ego is that overconfidence, right? And this is easy to happen in our day and age with social media and, celebrity. Celebrity used to be a really big thing. Now, celebrity can mean a million different things, and how you get there can be a million different ways as well, too. But success and constant praise can result in an exaggerated sense of self and importance. And in a world where you're measured by likes, in a world where you're measured by followers, it's easy to get this, kind of inflated thing. Now, it's funny, in my experiences, some of the people that I've met that are wildly successful, whether it's financial or celebrity and fame and things like that, the people who have had it, versus maybe some of the new folks who are just getting it seem to be vastly different. Like they've learned to kind of deal with the fame and comes with that and have found their way to keep humble in spite of kind of being well known when you walk out in public and things like that, versus somebody who may just have a bunch of followers all of a sudden, that arrogance that comes with it, the ego when they walk in the door and want to be seen. And it's really an interesting thing. I've been fortunate enough to meet some really cool and interesting people over my life, and it never fails that the people who really have it tend to be much more humble, much more likable and approachable. Not everybody. I don't know everybody in Hollywood and things like that, but I've certainly known a fair number of people, and it's like, wow, they're just a normal person, but they've managed this. They keep their life in check, and they probably use a variety of these types of things that we're going to talk about today to make sure that they stay humble and stay in check with themselves as well, too. But now you get influencers and things like that. They go to a hotel and expect you to upgrade them to this or this and that, and it's just like, holy cow. These people are disgusting. It's disgusting. It really is. So another number three cause of the imbalanced ego is just that general lack of self-awareness, right? So individuals who lack self-awareness do not reflect on their behavior, and they're more likely to have that imbalanced ego. So if you're not ever taking time to kind of pause, look around, do an accurate self-reflection of who I am, who I want to be, the people I surround myself, how I treat other people, those types of things, it's very easy to kind of get out of line. And I also think it's important to have friends around you that may be able to give you a sharp elbow to the ribs and be like, hey, okay, that was not cool how you're doing that. Or, hey, you're getting a little out of line. This isn't exactly the person that you've been your whole life. You get a little bit of fame and a little bit of notoriety, and all of a sudden you're this. You know, what was the one quote I heard from somebody else even said, you know, money doesn't change who you are, it just exaggerates who you've always been. Meaning, so it's like if you were some egotistical person and now you get a bunch of money, now you're just going to be that on maybe a more grander scale. And I kind of reflect on that from every once in a while, because I've seen a lot of people do well with sell their businesses and things like that. And some people just continue being the person that they were, and some people all of a sudden become this. And it's like, oh no, I think they were always that. I think this just gave them the ability to be it on a much grander, louder, annoying scale, right? Last but not least is that external validation. So that reliance on external validation for self-worth can create an unstable ego. I should have just labeled this one social media, right? I mean, that's just what that should be called 100%. You know, this is a new phenomena. I know it doesn't seem new, especially to kind of younger folks that are out there, but for those of us who've been alive more than 20 years, it's still new. You know, the fact that you get likes, the fact that you get views, the fact that you get comments, engagement, and all this type of stuff, and that is what builds a lot of your self-worth, can easily create this imbalance or the inflated self-worth and ego that goes along with that. Okay, so now we know where it came from, kind of what leads to these imbalances. How do we keep it in check? How do you find some balance in your life? You know, how do you kind of maybe talk to a friend who has now gone off the rails because they found some fame or something that has kind of shot their ego into a place where you're going, don't really like what I see over there? Number one would be self-reflection, right? So if you're able to kind of make this a regular practice around understanding your own strengths, so your weaknesses. Maybe you add some journaling to this as well too, some meditation, some mindfulness practices can all aid. All it really is taking time to reflect and make sure that you're actually kind of taking a look at your life, what you're doing, how you're behaving, how you're acting, and making sure it's in line with the values of who you want to be, right? Harder to do than you think, but you've got to find some time and do this. Again, I find my time through hot yoga. Boom, put it on your bingo card. I mentioned it. I find that time to give an hour out of my day each day to just kind of think and make sure that I'm doing and operating in the way that I want to be doing, right? Find whatever it is that works for you. Go for a walk, go for a hike, go to the gym, listen to music, listen to podcasts, do whatever it is it takes, but find some time to make sure that you're kind of walking in your own values as well, right? You know, another way to keep it in check is get some feedback, right? This is what I was kind of mentioning earlier. Talk to your friends. You know, getting some constructive feedback from your family, your trusted friends, mentors can help make sure that you're staying in perspective with your behavior and your actions. Because sometimes it can be difficult for you to really realize that you're not acting the same way and that the person that you may think that you are over here is not the person that you're actually portraying or giving off to the world. You do have to be open to the possibility that that could be negative as well, too, and make sure you're not taking that too personal. But I think it's an important thing to do is be like, hey, look, you know what? I know things are changing a little bit in my life. Am I still kind of online here? Am I off track? And they'll probably give you some constructive criticism more than likely and help maybe, and be open to listen to that and see if you can change course as well, too. Another thing in terms of keeping this in check is just making sure you're walking in some gratitude as well, too. Again, that's a term that's thrown a lot on social media and all these different things, but practicing gratitude kind of shifts focus from oneself to others, right? I was just having a conversation with my daughter around this, too. We were at we're by the mall here in Scottsdale, Arizona. We went to Build-A-Bear with Grampy beforehand, and it's like, I want this, I want this, I want this. And we've had this conversation before, is like, sometimes it's really nice to do something for someone else. So we went to Build-A-Bear and built a bear for her, baby cousin that was just born not too long ago, and wanted to make sure not everything needs to be a lesson, and she didn't get one, which I think at first she's kind of like, but I think it's important to kind of keep that type of mentality of thinking about other people first. And that was just kind of a little lesson that we just did, an hour before the show. Thinking and shifting the focus from yourself to thinking about others. And I think that's a really important thing when making sure that we want to address this ego thing as well, too, which dovetails into the next point, which is service to others. Engaging in acts of kindness and helping others promote empathy and reduces the self-centeredness. What's funny is I was doing the show prep for this as well, too. It's like, what a lot of this sounds like? AA. You know what I mean? Because so much of what we do in addiction and alcoholism was focused on ourselves, and I think that the ego was a huge thing as well too, is that a lot of these principles of doing things for other people, mindfulness, gratitude, it dovetails into the ego. And I think when we're actively drinking and using drugs, I mean, our ego is certainly inflated, but it's also just this we're the center of the universe type of thing as well too. And so a lot of these things, as I was kind of prepping for this, I was like, boy, this sounds like a 12-step meeting or something like that. But it's true, and a lot of these things are overall. And I tell this to people all the time, and the 12-step thing is a great way to live whether you have a drug or alcohol problem as well too. They're just good things to live by as well too, and I encourage people to at least take a look at that as well. You know, next up on the list of keeping the ego in check is kind of continuous learning. So adopting this mindset of really, I want to be a lifelong learner, being open to new experiences and viewpoints. It helps keep your ego flexible, right? So you're not so rigid and just set and it's my way and this is what we're doing. If you kind of take this little more worldly view, be open to new things that maybe you don't know every single thing, I think A, you're going to be a happier person. B, it's going to help keep you in check because you might learn some new things versus just this kind of marching forward thinking that your way is the only way. So I think that's a nice little thing to keep in mind as well too. Now, here's another little thing for keeping your ego in check. Set some realistic goals for yourself. Setting and achieving realistic goals can help build genuine self-esteem without inflating the ego. So if you have some business goals or maybe some financial savings goals or you want to take a trip or you want to write that book or whatever it is, let's set some realistic things because then when you cross them off your list, you're building your ego through effort, through accomplishing things that you set out to. That is real ego in a positive way because you set something, you achieved it, and now you've kind of added that to your base that's built that character of who you are as well too. And last but not least, on just, how to keep your ego in check is really having healthy relationships. So maintaining healthy and supportive relationships provides a balanced perspective on oneself. I think it's really important to have this for a variety of reasons, but with those healthy relationships and those supportive relationships, A, people are going to help keep you in check. But you need to be on the level with those folks and be like, hey, if I get too far out of line, please make sure, don't embarrass me out in public or something like that, but hey, can we meet for coffee? Or, hey, I'd love to chat with you. I think some things that I should probably just bring to your attention real quick. See if you can be nice. See if you can be supportive. But keeping those types of people in your life versus just yes men or yes people or clingers on, or maybe you've got a couple bucks and you got a little entourage that's following you that just wants to kind of keep pushing you and helps inflate kind of this and perpetuate this ego thing that you might be going on. That's not the people that I think that you should have close to you. Let's have some supportive people who can help hold you accountable, help keep you grounded a little bit in this as well, too. Look, the ego is a really tricky thing. This is just a brief kind of overview. Again, when I do these episodes and I do these topics, I like to bring things to your attention. Whether or not I have the answer for you, probably not. What my goal is to bring it to your attention. Think about some of the topics that I've brought up here today, some of the ways that maybe you can help mitigate some of your ego. Maybe talk to some friends in your own life and just make sure that you're doing a little check-in every once in a while to make sure this ego or whatever the topic is on your radar so that you can potentially help improve that along the way. Look, nobody likes to be around that crazy egomaniac type of person. So this is one that, you could maybe use a little bit of work on. Share this episode with a friend, maybe have them out for a cup of coffee and be like, hey, I've been meaning to talk to you. I don't know, as things have kind of changed over the course of time, I just thought maybe we could have a conversation with that. Not exactly easy, but I think it'd be worth it. And in the end, they'll probably appreciate it as well, too. So hope you enjoyed this episode. My name is Steve Moak. I am the Unlicensed Counselor. Until next time, thank you very much.